It's hard for me to believe that there's a series that's existed since 1993, and yet this is my first time ever experiencing it, but that's exactly the case here with Empire of Angels 4. Welcome everybody to I Dream of Indie. My name's Ole Gamer Joe, and this is our Empire of Angels 4 review on the Nintendo Switch. The game will also be released on the Xbox and PlayStation platforms, and was previously released on Steam PC quite a few years ago now. If the marketing for this game didn't give it away, yes, this is an all-female cast that you'll be playing as in this strategy RPG, with a story that begins in the Kingdom of Asgard, which has gone through various wars throughout its history, mostly due to corrupt rulers that want to spread their influence. This doesn't go over well with another kingdom known as Mentu, who themselves decide to declare independence. This ultimately leads to a war that will publicly take place for about a year, but the reality of the situation is that it rages on much longer than that. Making matters worse, a plague eventually breaks out, turning people into monsters, and thus the Namtar investigation team is formed to get things back under control. That is the basic underlying plot of Empires of Angels 4, but the reality is that there's a lot more going on here, plenty of different sub-stories between the different characters that you'll meet along the way. Many of the interactions between these characters are pretty hilarious actually, and they're told through text with no English voice acting, but you do get the original voice acting included here. I'll tip my hat to the developers here. While it's not going to win any awards, they've turned a pretty generic plot into something worth reading through. Won't be for everybody, but I was entertained, and I found that the story wasn't overly intrusive. You get a few cutscenes here or there between the different battles that you'll go through, but they're not overly long like a lot of these games can tend to have. I did find myself enjoying some of the banter between these different characters and some of the hilarious situations that they find themselves in. I don't think it will be for everyone. Again, not going to win any awards, but entertaining. If you are a fan of more simplistic strategy RPGs, I think you'll find a lot to like in the gameplay here. It is not full of overly complex systems. It's easy enough to pick up, learn, and play, but it still has enough depth where it's not entirely boring. Combat is turn-based and grid-based, and of course you'll be beginning each battle by setting your units out there. You can place them in certain orders depending on their class. Where you want to place them, it's entirely up to you. When it is time to move your character, this is represented by blue grids on the screen. This shows your character's movement, and then you'll have to dance around enemies, of course, just as you would in any other strategy game. While there are various different classes throughout the game, you have three main actions that you can choose between: attacking, recovering, or using one of your support skills, depending on what your class is. When you do finally go in for your attack, yellow grids will represent your attack radius, and then red grids will represent your accuracy, and you'll be able to tell just exactly how much damage the enemy will do back to you if you're standing next to them, and how much damage you'll be dealing out. Some light exploration can be had depending on the map that you're on. You might be going off the beaten path a little bit to find some treasure chests, opening those up, or there might be locked doors in front of you and you can use keys on those to advance forward as well. Eventually, as you get deeper into the game, you'll unlock unit functions, and this is where you can upgrade to different classes for your different characters. These upgrades can be performed on the world map screen between levels, where you can also bounce between different areas, take on some optional quests, try to level up, that kind of thing. Though the game is never too challenging until you get quite a bit further into it. Eventually the difficulty will ramp up, but I found for the most part the challenge to be what I would describe as fair. You'll need a good balanced cast here. You'll want a healer, of course, you'll want an archer to strike enemies from a distance, and you'll want some warriors that can get on the front line and bash away at foes. Anyways, just to touch on the upgrading a little bit more here, what happens is as you progress through battles, you'll gain unit stars, and the more unit stars you have, the more different classes you'll be able to unlock. The system is very simple again, just as most things are in this game, easy to understand and entertaining enough. I can't stress this enough. If you like a lot of layers or deep intricacies in your strategy RPGs, this one probably won't speak to you very much. Graphically, I thought Empire of Angels 4 was cute and performed decently on the Switch. You're not getting 60 frames per second here or anything, and it's not amazing looking. Some of the textures are pretty old at this point, and they look washed out. Some of the environments don't look all that great. The camera can be a little wonky here or there. Performance is decent, though, and even in the handheld mode, I didn't have any major frame rate drops that stopped me from being able to enjoy my experience. I did enjoy the character portrait arts that you'll come across in the different dialogue sections of the game, and I thought it was just cute, you know? It wasn't anything great. It doesn't look like a modern game. Again, this was on PC in 2016, so I wouldn't expect that necessarily. But overall, it's not ugly or anything like that. The enemy designs are a little bit on the bland side and perhaps a bit uninspired, but overall, it just looks fine. I'm not really complaining too much about the graphical aesthetic. It gets the job done. But the soundtrack is surprisingly quite good. There's some emotional string-based orchestrated songs throughout this game that you might not be expecting. They did actually hit me on an emotional level. Some of the songs are a bit sillier. It's a diverse soundtrack. It's not just all about orchestrated pieces, but no, it's actually not a bad set of musical compositions in general. Sound effects were a little bit on the generic side, and I do have to point out that when you kill an enemy in this game, you literally knock their socks off or they lose their clothes, which I thought was kind of funny myself, but if that kind of thing offends you, do be aware of that. It's pretty commonplace. Also, when you're upgrading units in this game, you get a Sailor Moon-esque transformation scene that I quite enjoyed. But overall, visuals decent, audio pretty solid actually, sound effects a little bit to be desired, but yeah, a great soundtrack. As someone who just likes to turn their brain off when they play a strategy game from time to time and not have to overthink things, I actually kind of like this game. I think it has its issues. The performance isn't amazing. The gameplay is not really deep enough to hold serious strategy fans' interests, but the story was entertaining. I like the characters. I know that this aesthetic won't be for everyone, but look, for the price tag, you're getting hours and hours of gameplay. It's hard to really argue with that, right? It's not a bad little strategy game for the Nintendo Switch. It's welcome on this library. I could see more casual strategy fans having a good time taking this one on the go and slowly plugging away at it. I'd like to thank you so much for watching the latest video from I Dream of Indie. We'd now like to take a moment to thank our great indie warriors who support us through channel memberships. Mitchell Hall, Kevalo, Bunny, Bill Tikas, Christian Cruz, Strict9, Rosie Syntax, Chris Jackson, Nathan Moore, Peach, Adriana Amato, CJR, Jesse, Falco, Lombardi, C. Coil, and Skeptism. Thank you for everything you do for independent games, developers, publishers, and for I Dream of Indie. Everybody else, head down to the description box below. Let's defeat that echo chamber and bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming.